In this video, I want to talk about why those even seemingly insignificant little white lies actually damage our character, harm those around us, and more broadly, even corrupts the world around us. So one day, a young lawyer was in the same room working as his boss. The big boss, the guy who's at the top of the company. And the phone rang and the young lawyer picked it up, but the big boss said to him, "If it's for me, tell them I'm not here." So the young lawyer answered the phone and he said, "Yes, he's here," and handed the phone over to the big boss. And the big boss glared at him, face turning red, but nonetheless had a short conversation on the phone, hung up the phone, and then was about to turn to this young mid-level lawyer and absolutely tear him to shreds, but the young lawyer spoke first, and he said this: "I will never lie for you, and I will never lie to you." Do you think that he got laid off from his position or got a promotion and put onto more cases? Well, we'll talk about the answer to what actually happened to him later, and actually something even more important than that. But first, we really need a little bit of context to appreciate the answer. Like, why should we even tell the truth in the first place when lying has such obvious benefits? It can prevent small arguments, it can be helpful in developing our careers, it helps us avoid embarrassment, but herein lies the problem. While it's true that we may sometimes get away with lying, like we know when we lie, we feel like a deep internal twist in our gut. It just does not feel good when we withhold from speaking our truth or withhold from telling the truth. It's like our conscience is damaged.
You don't wake up in the morning berating yourself for telling the truth. You wake up at 4 a.m. berating yourself for violating your conscience.
Telling the truth is not easy by any means. Let's start with a common, seeming trivial example. Your friend asks you, "Does this dress make me look fat?" Let's also assume that your friend is 29 years old, actually is considerably overweight, and one of her fundamental desires right now is to get into a relationship. So what do? How do you respond to that? These situations are actually super challenging, and many will take that easy path of just telling that little white lie that doesn't really mean that much. But by not telling our friend our subjective truth, are we not robbing them of feedback that could potentially move them forward in life? In Sam Harris's book, Lying, he tells a story of a similar situation where he and his friend, along with both their wives, were sitting by a poolside. And Sam's friend actually asked him outright in front of the two wives, "Do you think that I look fat?" And Sam's response was, "I don't think anyone would call you fat, but I think that you could lose 25 pounds. Sam told the truth. 2 months later, Sam's friend ended up losing 19 pounds. So if Sam withheld telling that objective feedback to his friend may not have made that move to actually improve his attractiveness, his health, and his well-being by losing weight. When we have people who we know will tell the truth, we trust them far more deeply. And they, in turn, they will open up about more sensitive things to us and form deeper relationships. Especially if we make clear what our biases are, because we're not perfect at the end of the day, and also take the Buddha's advice of right speech. Is it timely? Is it true? And spoken with a mind of loving kindness. If you take this advice, you really can't go wrong. Now, when we just pause and get logical about telling the truth, it's actually very practical for us as well. By saying how we actually feel about things, we don't deny and repress our truth, and people actually understand what it is that we want. And as a result, both parties actually end up being happier. But looking more deeply, truth goes beyond just interpersonal relationships. So recently, in my current position as a support worker where I work with elderly and disabled clients, but another part of the job is to do domestic assistance work, of cleaning basically. And just recently I was given one of these shifts where I was required to drive 30 minutes out for a 2-hour shift that you're really not that well compensated for making the trek all the way out. Now, because I finished early, the tendency was to want to clock off early and just say that I worked the full 2 hours without actually having done that. And no one really would have known, no one would have really kicked up a fuss about it. What I ended up doing was clocking off and just saying authentically, I finished 26 minutes early. Even though I sacrificed a bit of pay, but I am embedding telling the truth in every situation in my life. At least that's the goal. And I'm using these sorts of situations as a training ground. This also saves me from the fact that I no longer have to recount a false story. I'm only accountable to the truth now, and that is just such a less stressful way to live in life. Now, these examples might seem quite trivial in the grand scheme of things when we consider the horrors of the world and the truths that people sometimes are faced to withhold and challenged with. But the fact of the matter is, they're really not insignificant. And this is because white lies rapidly scale. Every time that we don't tell the truth, no matter how subtle, we solidify the fact that we are someone who avoids telling the truth for expedience. And if this becomes a recurring pattern, we have every reason to believe that the more that we do this, the more it's going to solidify the fact that we will lie when we need to not lie the most in the harder situations. Or will we be able to stand up to a group of people who are challenging our beliefs and still speak our truth? Will we be able to challenge political consensus when it becomes dangerous? And will we be able to stand up to tyrannical forces? Well, if we take the approach of how you do one thing is how you do everything, the deeper thing that we're doing here is we're creating a deep internal coherence and integrity that makes us unshakable when challenges come our way, that we will still speak our truth, and we're embedding this into our character. Now back to the law student at the start who was on the phone and handed it over to the boss, who then glared at him before he interjected. What ended up happening to him? Well, it turns out that that lawyer ended up getting a promotion, getting put on more cases, and becoming the boss's personal attorney. But I think by now you can probably see that that doesn't actually matter. What was more important was that lawyer was actually putting his neck out there. He could have very well been fired, but because he valued truth, he was willing to not break his integrity and speak his truth. And in the end, that is far more important. And to summarize this nicely, a wasteland of embarrassment and social upheaval can be neatly avoided by following a simple precept in life: do not lie. If you made it this far, you're doing amazing to support this channel, so thank you. You might like this video now, and consider liking and commenting on the video to let me know what you think. Much love, and I'll see you in the next video. Adios.